Peace, family, and welcome to the Drapetomaniac Podcast. This is Ayapo Yapa, the HDIC, that is, the head Drapetomaniac in charge, and we're here to have conversations on how to get off this plantation. A few days ago I was typing, and my wife stopped by the desk. I told her I was typing my response to a YouTube video I just seen. She said, "Oh, I thought you were working on your podcast." I said, "No, I'll wait until the election is over and someone has been decided before doing that." But then as I thought about it, I told her that I think it would be interesting or an interesting exercise to write my podcast about who gets elected before actually knowing who won. Why? Because it doesn't matter who wins. Donald Trump and Joe Biden are both the same guy.
Excuse me. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure that you listeners are listening to the Drapetomaniac podcast on doayamedia.com. You are, right?
Donald Trump and Mike Pence is a city where there are Confederate flags and monuments all over the place, and where you stop to get something to eat and the waiter or waitress acts like they don't even want to serve you. And when they do, they spit in your food before they give it to you. On the other hand, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris is like a city where there are no Confederate flags and no monuments all over the place. And where when you stop to get something to eat, the waiter or waitress smiles warmly and serves you. And before they do, they spit in the food before they give it to you. In my podcast last week, I talked about the fact that we need to stop turning our eyes and that we need to start looking. Looking at what? Looking at the horror that is set before us. The horror that is Donald Trump and Mike Pence. I don't need to dog out Trump. He doesn't even try to hide that he's a piece of crap. So I don't need to really go into a lot of exposition about it. And it looks like Joe Biden very well may win the presidency. With the election of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, the country in general, and many black people specifically, have said in a very loud voice, "I do not want to see." What do you mean, Ayapo? It seems like everyone will be alright with someone who looks the part, even though inside they're exactly the same person as the one that you want out. Just as racist, just as evil, just as demonic, just as destructive, just as corrupt, just as big a liar, just as likely a rapist, just as much a cheat, just as much a person who will seek to harm our people with every chance they get. But it's all good as long as on the outside they don't consistently make it their business to show what a piece of garbage they are, like Trump does. And frankly, it is maddening to me, and I just can't make sense out of any of it. When our people talk about how they hate Trump, they will talk about the fact that he's a racist, which he is, and it's obvious by the things that he says and does, and that he's inept, an agent of chaos, and the whole 9 yards, all of which is true. You get no argument from me. I said all that to say this. 90% of people who hate Trump's guts, when asked, will never talk about any specific policies he's put forth. It is always based on personality. The fact that he's a man-child, the fact that he's crooked, a womanizer, racist, and so on and again. I agree. I can't argue with any of that. The point that I'm trying to make is that Biden, before becoming vice president, sponsored the crime bill that, in combination with Bill Clinton, is responsible for the mass incarceration of our people. He was nicknamed Credit Card Joe because he was so in bed with and bought and paid for by the credit card companies that he worked to pass legislation that made it even more difficult for people to get out from under the crushing credit card debt, even when filing for bankruptcy. He has sought for years to cut Social Security. He is definitely racist, and his alliances and remarks about our people prove it. People hate Trump because of what he says and what he tweets and the way he carries himself and so on. Fine. But Joe Biden has actually done the things Trump talks about and tweets about. And worse, Joe Biden is Donald Trump. He's just a version of Donald Trump who has a bit more, but not much, restraint and the ability to not say the quiet parts out loud. Biden is our way of closing our eyes and looking away. With Trump, you know you're dealing with a devil who's trying to do you in. With Biden, you have someone who says the right things he's had decades to practice saying. He tells everyone what he thinks they want to hear. He doesn't tweet idiocy every 3 minutes. He doesn't make stupid, ridiculous, outrageous comments on a daily basis. And because of that, some of us will breathe a sigh of relief once he's in office. Well, I like knowing what I'm dealing with. I would much rather deal with a wolf that I can see so that I can at least have some kind of knowledge base from which to make a plan to get away from it than to deal with an angry, medium-sized dog that's sneaking up on me in the grass and I can't get a bead on them where they are so that I know which way to go. Trump is the wolf I can see. Biden is the sneaking dog that I can't see. And I'm mystified by the fact that as a population, and I'm not just talking about black people here, people would rather see someone in office who's smiling in their face and telling them what they want to hear, but in reality, working against them behind the scenes in the proverbial smoke-filled room. And they would rather have that than someone who you can see coming, so you at least have some kind of a point of reference to work with on how to maneuver around them. I genuinely don't understand it. I do understand that our people want to feel like we matter. We want to feel like we have some kind of power to affect this system or within this system. The truth is, as I have spelled out and will continue to spell out, even if you look at it purely from a standpoint of common sense, even without all the stats and studies that I constantly hammer our people with, this is a system that is against our people by design, and it runs on the failure, subjugation, and oppression of our people. And somehow, we are deluding ourselves into thinking that people who have privilege within this system and who benefit from our being at the bottom of it will somehow give up that privilege and advantage because we're making demands with absolutely no or else what behind it. The threats we make are empty and have no power behind them. We have no power within this system. Our power lies outside of this system. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter one iota who's sitting in the White House or in Congress or in the Senate or in the Supreme Court. Not for our people, it doesn't. With any foundational premise, if the premise is flawed, then everything that comes from that premise will be equally erroneous, if not more so. I often listen to a speaker and author named Chris Hedges. I heavily consider what he has to say because, in my opinion, he has about one of the most well-informed and solid grasps on the futility of seeking to somehow fix this system of anyone I've ever listened to. I don't agree with him on every point, but I do agree with him when he says there is absolutely no way to quote-unquote fix the present corporate-owned government because the government and those who run it and work within it are completely bought and paid for by banks, corporations, and special interests. And he's a white man spelling this out. And I do listen because just like the YouTube commentator Sister Ajali, the radical sister, often says, pink people want to live too. And to that end, there are some who do speak out or seek truth or remedies, if only for their own survival in the failed state in which we live. Within the U.S., and in the world, there are a handful of people and corporations with the collusion of the white population which has benefited from their wickedness that has now irradiated the oceans and in countless other ways destabilized the entire planet and set it on a collision course with destruction. As a people, we have no true allies. Just as when we were young, we were fed the propaganda about Abraham Lincoln and abolitionists. If Lincoln could have kept slavery in place and preserved the Union, he would have done so. He did not, quote unquote, emancipate enslaved Africans and their descendants because of any big internal moral quandary he was going through. It was simply more expedient for him to do so. And as far as white abolitionists went, we have to look no further than Oregon, where the state was solidly anti-slavery, but only for economic reasons. They wanted the abolishment of slavery, but they made it against the law statewide to be black in that state. So much so that they actually put it down in writing in their constitution, which is something no other state did. That's how much they wanted to make sure black people could not live in that state. But yet, they were against slavery. When it comes to black people, we genuinely have sought and continue to seek justice for all people, and that is easily proven historically. But when the shoe is on the other foot, we get lip service from others, but no real support in that way. Most everyone else just wants the boot off their neck and will fight side by side with us, marching, protesting, and so on to get it. But once they are able to get up, and as I said in another podcast, we black people are yelling among the crowd of allies, "We've won! We've won!" Suddenly they'll look over at us and say, "What do you mean we?" This country was founded upon a flawed foundation, and everything that springs from it can only be flawed and corrupt. True, the founders of this country meant for it to be a taken over, colonized hell for everyone but them and their people, but ultimately, like all evil, it is not sustainable. At some point, it must collapse under its own weight. If you take nothing else from these podcasts, just take this. As a people, we have no power within this system or this construct. None. And we must seriously question those who contend that we do, or that we can even actually ever achieve any power, again, within this system. But within our own system, a system we must first construct within our own minds and individual lives, and then through connections with others of the same mind, we have massive power. The power to control our own narrative, the power to self-determine, the power to determine our own destinies, the power to see ourselves without looking through the lens of someone else who actually hates us and seeks our failure and downfall. It doesn't matter who's elected or sits in the various offices. None of this is ours or for us. Our energies are better placed elsewhere, where we can do the best for ourselves, our families, and our communities apart from this construct. Final question. Even if you could achieve the quote-unquote American dream, or somehow have some kind of equality within this system, knowing what you know about what the U.S. truly is, what it truly does, and what it truly stands for, do you really want to be associated with that? Or do you want to be associated with your new tribe? A tribe of people who are brilliant, artistic, peace-loving, fun to be around, nature-respecting, caring, loving, giving, honorable people who, when left to their own, do spectacular things. For me, that's the association that I want. Thank you for listening to this edition of the Draped Maniac podcast. And before I go, I just want to thank all of you who listen to the Draped Maniac podcast, both on doayamedia.com as well as on YouTube, and who leave comments. I read every one of them, and I'm encouraged by them. And I hope that as I make these podcasts, I'm saying something or doing something in my small way to encourage you to think of new avenues by which to escape this wicked system and to get off this plantation. That said, this is Ayapo Yapa, the HDIC, wishing you safety, security, and sanity through separation. along with peace and blessings until we meet again next week at this same time. And until then, I'll see you on the run.
And thank you again for listening to the Drapedomaniac podcast. Tune in next week at doiamedia.com. DOEAIAMEDIA.com. And again, we'll catch you on the run. Peace.